and I'll try to live up to the billing. And it's great to see so many familiar face or names, at least in the Zoom room. And some of you probably would have heard me talk about some of the stuff before. So the title is Achieving Our Goals in Transport. And where a lot of this information is going to come from is from this report that was launched only a couple of weeks ago. It's the EPA State of the Environment report for 2024. It's a report that comes out every 4 years. And I was lucky enough to be the lead author on the environment and transport chapter. The QR codes that you'll see throughout the slides are there if you want to get the links to the documents. The other document that a lot of this work also comes from is from the Irish Climate Change Assessment, again also funded by the EPA, and my part in that was funded by the Department of Transport. And I was one of the lead authors on Volume 4, which was realizing the benefits of transition and transformation. If you haven't read any of these documents, well, the one I would say to read is the chapter on the environment and the state of the art one, but also the Irish Climate Change Assessment is a fantastic resource for researchers, policymakers, for everybody. And I would say that I suppose I'm an author on it, but it really is a great resource. Okay, to start off. Why is this important? Why is transport important? It's because it consumes everything. It impacts upon our environmental, our emissions, our noise, our air quality. It impacts upon our social aspects of society. It can reduce social isolation, livable communities, equitable access to amenities. From an economic perspective, more efficient movement means better cities and better places to live. It reduces congestion. It's estimated that congestion could cost Dublin by 2040 almost 1.5 billion euro a year. And then health and well-being, better transport, cleaner air, less cars, making our streets and our spaces safer, just creates this community. So this is kind of the why this is so important to everybody, and also transport's so important because it's the thing that we do together the most. So where are we currently? So let's get the bad news out of the way to start off with. So this is where our emissions are. This is from the State of the Environment report. So transport is about 21% of our total emissions in Ireland. And of that 21%, 95% of it comes from road-based transport. So that is the thing that we need to tackle. And there are many documents, many research papers saying how we should do that and what's the best way to achieve this. This was from a report earlier in the week that the first quarter of emissions from transport in this year were up 2.7% on the equivalent time period last year. So that the trend is increasing, unfortunately, again, in transport. Obviously, you can see the dips there that happened during COVID. They didn't fall by that much when we were all locked up and couldn't move that far. Our emissions didn't fall anywhere near enough. In terms of the energy consumption in transport, this is where it comes from. Passenger cars, petrol and diesel cars, heavy goods vehicles, light goods vehicles, buses, and others. So again, a lot of these slides, a lot of this information is in the State of the Environment report. This is one of the worrying trends because this seems to be government's main way of reducing emissions in our sector. And these are the January to September comparison between 2024 and 2023. And you can see here that sales of new battery electric vehicles are down 27% on the same period last year. And I'll get to this later on in the talk, but this is the kind of the cornerstone of Ireland's climate policy when it comes to transport. If anyone's heard me talk before, you know I have reservations about this. They don't decrease congestion, and there's a whole heap of issues to do with the life cycle cost of these vehicles. In terms of public transport delivery, this is what we need to deliver. Before 2042, 18 kilometers of mainly underground metro link, the Lewis to Finglas, Lucan, Poolbeg, Bray, and 17 kilometres of light rail in Cork. 16 new bus corridors in Dublin, as well as bus connects outside of Dublin, and then the Dart Plus programme. There has been positive news this week on Lewis Finglas. Lewis Finglas is taking far too long to build. I said I get the negative stuff out of the way at the start. Um, it will have taken 11 years to deliver that 4 kilometers of light rail. And in a climate emergency, that's just simply not good enough anymore. It took 25 years for us to build the current 40 kilometers of light rail we have, and we need to deliver the 61 kilometers in 18 years. So we need to be going gangbusters at delivering this infrastructure. Where are we in terms of the modes of transport that are currently being used? So this is a very valuable piece of data that comes from the National Transport Authority. It tells us how we travel around our country. And here you can see that in 2023, 71% of all of our trips were made by car. So that means that we're still at 2017 levels of car usage in terms of a percentage of mode share. All of this seems really bad, but the thing about transport is that we're facing an uphill battle. We're trying to reduce our emissions while the demand for freight, and that's the next slide, sorry, the slide after, while the demand for freight is increasing and the demand for mobility is increasing. The other thing about where we currently are is what type of fleet of vehicles we currently have out on our roads. Here you can see the blue is anything that's not classified as an SUV. And then the green, orange, and mustard maybe color are all SUVs. All SUVs aren't the same. Some of them are a lot worse than others. We do need to classify them better. But the worst SUVs, the ones with the biggest engines and the heaviest vehicles, emit about 20% more than a normal petrol or diesel car. So for every 5 of these bad SUVs, let's call them, that we're selling, we're getting rid of the benefit of selling one electric car. So we really need to look at our stock of vehicles as well in Ireland. This isn't a lot of these problems aren't unique to Ireland. They are unique. They're seen right across Europe and the world. So why is it going to be such a challenge to do this in Ireland? So this is the population distribution in Ireland, where we all live. And as you can see, Dublin and the city and its suburbs is about a quarter of all of our population. But then you can see that towns under 500 of population and even less than that. So there's a huge rural population in Ireland, and how we decarbonize that transport is going to be it's going to be difficult to achieve. In terms of density, Malta skews this graph, but where are we? We're here. So we have a relatively low density in terms of population. And in transport, to deliver the metros and the light rails and the bus services, we need densely populated areas in order for that to be achieved. In rural areas, we will need to start to think differently about how we deliver that type of decarbonisation. And this is the EU average, so we're well below the EU average. Then this has knock-on impacts. So again, this is from the NTA data, and it shows us that the proximity to the things we need to get to, that's what links us, and that's why we use transport. About 70% of people in Ireland are within a 15-minute walk of a shop. So that's about 3.7 million people. And then you can see all of the other kind of amenities that people need to get to. And I suppose the one that's important here as well is a bus stop, that 65% of people are within a 50-minute walk of a bus stop. It doesn't say anything about the quality of the bus service that's provided there, but that's the percentage. When you look at Dublin, this is obviously a lot better. You can see that there's a much larger proportion of people that are close to a bus stop, 98%, and all of the other amenities that are there. And then rail, you can see, is at 50%. But then when you get to rural communities, so this is, more than the population that are in Dublin. Pubs and restaurants, shops, all of these things fall off a cliff when it comes to the proximity of a 50-minute walk to these. So this is how we need to think. We need to think clever about how we connect our rural communities, because this is again is a huge aspect of our emissions. And again, in terms of the freight, the slide I had moved up, but freight demand is increasing. One of the things we are seeing, though, which is good, is that there is a decarbonisation starting to happen in the freight sector. There are the sales of light goods and heavy goods vehicles that are fully battery electric is starting to that they're starting to increase actually as the passenger vehicles are decreasing. And freight is one of the things that's in the room that we really need to grapple, because it is causing such a huge amount of emissions. We do an awful lot on technologies and how to improve freight. We haven't done that much yet to look at the demand side of it. Why we're demanding all of this stuff, why it has to be just in time, why everything has to be at our house within 24 hours. So those types of things we do need to consider when it comes to freight. So the challenge is reduce our emissions by 50% by the end of the decade. It is a massive challenge, and this challenge is in other sectors as well. Other sectors are doing a lot better. Energy is doing really well. The built environment is doing well as well. Agriculture is doing its bit. Emissions in transport are stubbornly high, and this is because of all the reasons I mentioned there, because of our spatial layout and our density. But the 50% challenge is very, very difficult. The Climate Action Plan states that this is how we'll do it. Reduce vehicle kilometers by 20%, reduce fuel consumption by 50%, a 50% increase in active travel trips, 130% increase in public transport trips, and to sell 1 million electric vehicles. And on some of these we're doing well, on others we were doing well, and we're kind of falling back from where we were. So this is government policy: avoid, shift, improve. So avoid is better planning and reducing the need to travel, working from home, these types of things. And in the Climate Action Plan, 21% of our emissions reductions is to come from this area. Then equally in shift, this is getting more people onto more environmentally friendly modes of transport, public transport and active travel, and 21% is to come from there. And then finally, improve. So this is the electric vehicles, changing our fuel mixes, electrifying public transport. That almost 60% is coming from there. And that's why I feel there's a warning light there about the sales of electric vehicles, that we are betting an awful lot on that being realized. And even if it is realized, an electric vehicle takes up the same amount of space as a petrol or diesel vehicle, and that still is contributing to congestion. So underneath each of these three headings is how we're going to achieve this emissions reduction. So what research have I been involved in? I've picked out three because three of the ones that kind of fit into these themes. The first one is on working from home. And each of these are census years from 2002 to 2022. Obviously, COVID happened, and we could see what the impact of that then was in terms of the numbers of people working from home. And you can see that has more than doubled since 2016. So more people are working from home 5 days a week. This data doesn't take into account the people like, say, myself, that works from home maybe 2 or 3 days a week and then is in Trinity teaching. So it's only people that are working from home 5 days a week. So it's probably underrepresenting the numbers of people that are working from home. But the COVID reset, or whatever we want to call it, has had this benefit. There are knock-on impacts upon the, I suppose, the energy efficiency of lighting and heating homes and all these kind of things. And there's lots of research that's looked at that. But what we did was we partnered with a company called NOCO, and they were providing remote working hubs. And I think these are a fantastic way of invigorating communities, getting people back into rural Ireland, allowing people to work from home or work remotely in a more office-based environment. So we did a survey with them, and that QR code will bring you to that paper. And on average, respondents drove 60 kilometers less per day. So the people that responded to this, the people that were working in these hubs, were traveling very long distances to get to whichever city or wherever they were working. Um, Only 12% of respondents were traveling to these remote working hubs by car. The majority, and that compared to like 60 or 70, I think it was 65% that would have driven to the workplace anyway. Working from home in a remote working hub 3 days a week for a year would save 1.126 tons of CO2 a year. Um, and that just probably doesn't seem like an awful lot. But the more people that do this, the better. The other thing about all of this stuff, there isn't a silver bullet. There isn't a there isn't a policy that I can say, well, just do this. And if we do that, then we'll achieve our climate goals and everything will be great. One of the key things as well that we found from working with the company was that a large number of people were able to depart for work later. So they had more time in the morning, they maybe had more time to sleep, walk the dog, bring kids to school, live their lives. A better work-life balance was one of the things that we saw. So it was an interesting piece of work, and again, I think it's something that has a lot of potential in Ireland. This other one, this is one of the research projects that is currently ongoing. And if you want to be part of a paper that's published at some point, scan that QR code there. So it's a project called Tract that is funded by the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. We've developed this app, and the purpose of the app is to download it. And I encourage everybody to do that. And if you drive a petrol or diesel car, it'll find your car and tell you what kind of emissions. Will then know what emissions you're using. Then the app um, monitors the distances that you drive. We don't look at where you drive. We don't really care about that. And it will take up that information on the total number of kilometers that you drive. And then what it will do, it will present the data to you on a weekly basis saying, if you were driving an electric vehicle, these are the types of emission savings that you could have on a weekly basis or on an annual basis. And that takes into account things like the operating costs of electric cars being less. So it tries to give more information on how these electric vehicles are working. We have some data already on it. We have about 1,200 people that have downloaded the app, and a massive thank you to them, and have used it. And we can see the number of kilometers that have been driven, the petrol that we could save, or the fuel that we could save if they switched. And then you can see here that the likelihood, based upon the information, that perhaps their next car purchase would be electric. So the purpose of the study is to really empower people to say, look, this is a way in which you can do your part. We're looking at a couple of particular user groups, particularly people in rural Ireland we're very interested in. We're also very interested in taxi drivers, and the next study actually that I want to talk about links into those. Um, and then this is the final study, I think, that I want to talk about, and this is electrifying our taxi fleets. This is a piece of work that was done with one of my former MAI students, Leisha Kinsella, who graduated 2 years ago. She's currently on secondment to the NTA, and maybe in the Zoom room because I can't see who's in the Zoom room right now. And she and I worked with Freenow, the big taxi company. And the graphic here comes from the SFI Little Book of Science that's sent out to all the kids every year. So we were delighted that our study was chosen to be part of it. But essentially what the study showed is if we electrified all of the taxis in Dublin, that we could reduce emissions in the sector by 77%. The other thing that we showed was that a taxi drives 3 times as much as a regular car in the city. And I think if we move away from thinking about selling these cars and looking at kilometers driven by electric vehicles, more incentives to electrify our taxis, more incentives to electrify vehicles that are kind of the workhorses of our mobility system, I think is really, really important. And again, the QR link will get you to that paper. So then the green shoots, what's the good news? And where do I see lots of positivity? There's lots of negativity, and I was at a climate change advisory council event earlier in the week, and I was given out to for being too negative. So these are the positive things. Uh, In 2023, the NTA recorded 308 million public transport trips. So it was up on 2022 and on 2019, perhaps the best comparable year outside of COVID. So that is a fantastic achievement, and we need to do better. And that's thanks to things like lowering ticket prices, making tickets more or the pricing structure for public transport more transparent. All of those types of things are feeding into that. Um, in in line with Connecting Ireland, which is the massive rural public transport scheme that we have in the country. In 2023, we launched 34 enhanced and new bus services right across the country. And I was I on some during the summer I was up in Achill, and I was using the local link up there, and the bus services are absolutely everywhere, and it is fantastic. Um, Local Link in 2023 carried 3.2 million people. And this was a 78% increase on 2022, and a big increase as well, as you can see, on 2019. People are coming to from colleagues in the NTA, people are coming from the rest of Europe to see how we've done this, because it's such a good news story here in Ireland. Another one, and I really love this scheme. In Athlone, it became the first town in Ireland to have a fully electrified bus fleet, and it's expected to carry 10,000 passengers per week, and it could reduce emissions in that town by 400 tons of CO2 per annum. And it's inclusive. The buses are all wheelchair accessible. It's just a fantastic example. We need more of them, and I know that Limerick services like this are being rolled out in Limerick as well. Um, Bolt are shared bikes and scooters in Wexford. They've launched huge services in Sligo and Kilkenny. About 17,000 kilometers traveled, emissions reduced by 1.7 tons. Again, another study from, I think this was from the NTA as well, that walking and cycling take out about 680,000 car trips from our cities every year. Bus Connects has gotten planning permission, which is fantastic on some of the corridors, and there's more corridors to come. And then the one project, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit, is the Dublin City Pathfinder project. So this is a project whereby there are a number of areas right across our city that are going to have traffic restrictions applied. It's not banning traffic from the city. It's looking to move traffic around the city as opposed to going through the city. Um, Claire French, who works in Dublin City Council and a graduate of civil engineering, is the main person on this project, and she's done absolutely amazing work. But during the summer, the first of these interventions was brought in. So this is the plan. It's a fantastic plan, and it's starting to be realized. So this was what has happened on Bachelor's Walk and on Aston Quay. There are restrictions that you can't travel through between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Sunday. So it's this tiny little kind of square around O'Connell Bridge, that there isn't that you're not allowed to drive through. Um, 97% of the people that use this space will not be impacted, but most of them will have a positive impact, which I'll get to, but will not be impacted in the slightest for this intervention. One of my colleagues here in Trinity in the economics department, Barra Rowntree, he wrote, there was a lot of debate about this, a huge amount of debate about it. Barra wrote a reply to some of the research that was done to kind of go against the city plan. And he said if it was submitted by a student, he would fail it, and got a lot of traction with that. Barra's a great guy, and what they had submitted wasn't great. I'm not sure if I go as far as Barra did, but um, this is what was expected to happen. It was expected to be the sky was going to fall in. I think I did about 40 interviews on this. I wrote 3 op-eds on it. I was in Time magazine talking about this tiny little part of the city centre that was to be changed. So this is what was expected. But this is what happened. Public transport journeys fell by 24%, footfall increased. The retail car park usage fell by about 10 to 15%. There was a 60% decrease in car usage in the area, and there was an 11% increase in public transport usage in the area. So change is scary, and it's hard to. You have to bring people along the journey, and this is what was put in there could be easily taken out, but now we've seen it works. Now we need to get to all of the other areas across the city that do similar things. And I'm not saying that for a second that it's the it's absolutely perfect. We need to get the data, we need to monitor the data, we need to make sure the traffic isn't just gone somewhere else and causing a problem somewhere else. But the signs from the start, the initial signs from this project are that it has been very positive. So this is my last slide. So what do we need to focus on? We need to focus on the increased demand for mobility. We've never had the type of demand that we have for people to use their cars, buses, and all the rest. That's very apparent. We see that in the numbers of people that are moving around on a daily basis. The other thing we have are capacity constraints. The 61 kilometers of light rail that we need to deliver. You add that to retrofitting all of the houses that we need to do. You add that to going across. You add that to the retrofitting, the offshore wind, all of the other things that we need to do to address our climate concerns. The other thing as well that worries me here is the amount of graduates that we're producing, and our universities right across the country are under constraints because of poor funding from the state. In Dublin, I reckon we'll probably graduate maybe 110 civil engineers this year. We need multiples of that, but not only civil engineers. We need everybody in this area. So that's a big concern of mine. The emissions are rising in terms of transport, and they will rise for a while, I think, because it's really difficult to make this change to happen. You're asking people to, it's the one part of climate, I think, that, you're asking people to make relatively big changes. You slap solar panels on your roof and then you've kind of, you've done your bit, or you retrofit your house, and it's a one-off thing. Transport is a constant thing. The growing private car fleet, and then especially in terms of the SUVs, I think we've got capacities issues on the grid for heavy goods vehicles. That's something that concerns me. And the last one is our longer term ability to adapt, and how we do that. If we miss targets in this decade, how more difficult will targets be in the next decade? If we miss construction, say, of metro, if the next government decide, let's maybe, do something different, that could set that project back to, we will be talking about it for many, many decades to come. I'll be retired perhaps by the time it could get through. So we really need to be very mindful of the projects that are currently on the books and to get them across the line. And I think that is my last slide. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Brian. Oh, that has given me so many questions personally that I'd like to ask you. But I'm sure we'll cover them in our conversation. That it was absolutely perfect, spot on, in my view, on showing us where we could go. I deliberately started with the positive bits, and where we aren't going is probably the best description for it. But just to start off on the where we aren't going, I mean, I could ask you now. You in a way, you could just say, I've been doing this forever. I've been watching things not change and a little change. Do you actually believe, let's put it that way, that we actually can make our targets? Like, would you be ready to walk out and say, oh, throw my hands in the air, let someone else worry about this corner? Are you still, do you see large areas where we could make so I don't like the example actually of Finglas's 4 kilometers. That I find that personally very distressing, but you brought out the lovely example of the e-buses, for example, in Athlone, and then I was suddenly buoyant. I mean, maybe we should just be focusing on that type of obviously relatively easy, small community thing to do rather than be worrying about, yeah, where our department might be failing or certain areas that are failing, because we might be just, you know what I mean? We might be just knocking our heads off a wall and we should be maybe doing the stuff that we could do.
Um, the first bit about, throwing my hands in the air and walking out the door, it depends on the time of the day and the day of the week.
Or
And
I nearly didn't take any public transport myself yesterday after the train was an hour and a half late. Yeah, I guess it's like that.
it depends. And there's a student in civil engineering, and his father was in the National Transport Authority for a number of decades. And he came up to me at the end of the class after I did a big kind of, the start lecture. This is all the things we need to do. And then I was kind of like, well, it's just taken a long time. And he said to me, Brian, do you not get frustrated by all of it? And the answer was very quickly yes. Uh, yeah, the smaller things are great, and the smaller things are delivering on a community level, and we're getting an awful lot of benefit there. But we'll never get away from the big things we need to do. Cork needs light rail, and there's no two ways about that. Galway probably needs light rail as well. Galway's a very interesting case study. They could either build a motorway right around the city and repeat mistakes from the past, or they could just put a light rail system through the city. So those are the kind of things we will never get away from the big projects, unfortunately. The only thing that the big projects will end up doing is costing more. Metro the first time would have cost about 2.5 billion. Now the estimates are about 12 billion.
Oh gosh, yeah. So basically you're saying is it's a multifaceted, multi-scaled thrust that we need. And but when you boil it back down to the naked facts, it's about us, the population, taking responsibility for this. The use, for example, of different transport modes, and putting up with, say, outrageously full buses in the morning, which stress you out completely in the beginning, and not giving up on it, in order to actually, move, for example, the system along. So at the bottom line, even if we were to just even if we needed a light rail, we're still completely dependent on the user to say that we need the light rail, because otherwise it's never going to happen. We need it and we're going to use it, and then it has to be relatively low cost for the user, because if it becomes higher than what they were paying to drive quickly from A to B, then of course in a country where we pay outrageous amounts of tax, I have to say, on our salaries, that's not an additional cost you can actually lock on commuters.
No, I don't think you can. I think it's very frustrating that the delivery of the big public transport infrastructure projects, and we've had, for my money, I'm not affiliated to any party, but Eamon Ryan has been the best transport minister that I think we've ever had, and he has been transformative in the way we think about transport. And when he's been able to deliver things like Connecting Ireland, as I was talking about the rural public transport piece, that's happened really quickly. But Metro was in planning it's been in planning permission now for 2 years. And the delays that are in that. I don't think we can just say, well, we can't just put up with the public transport system that's currently there, and we need better. How we do that, we're very likely to have an election very, very soon. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing in terms of, and this kind of gets into the outside of my comfort zone, is kind of the governance of our cities. I spoke at two citizens' assemblies. The first one was on climate action. The next one was on the directly elected Dublin mayor. And I think that we need a person that can champion our cities. We've seen it in Paris, we see it in Barcelona, we saw it in London. When you have somebody there that has a mandate for a city, like Anna Hidalgo, she cleaned up the Seine. That was such a huge project. And what she's done for cycling in that city as well. She went to the people with her plan. They said, yeah, go for it. And she's been able to deliver it. So I think the governance part as well, I don't think we can put up with it. And that will always be the argument where you say, well, the restrictions in traffic in Dublin, or a congestion charge or something like that. People will always say, oh, public transport's not good enough. They said that before congestion charge came into London. But there is a quantum of improvement that is required.
Okay, so it definitely, on the one hand, is legislating, like we see around Aston and Key, for example, where the taxi drivers always fill my ear about how disgraceful it is, and also are always listening, or I'm always listening to the car park owners, which you showed the statistics on, moaning about how their capitalistic intake has gone down because no one's parking the car in there anymore. But yeah, so it's legislation and kind of slightly hard-nosed, and we're not doing this anymore on the one side because this is not good for all of us, and on the other hand, it's the population saying we don't want this anymore because it's not good of it for all of us. Like, I do not want to be stuck in traffic in the morning. I do not want to be knocked off my bike. I have to say, cycling in Dublin, it puts me off every time, considering that I've been in Europe for a long time. I kind of watch it and I think helmets have to be compulsory in this country. They're not, because it's such a dangerous exercise. So it's a strange mixture of public needs going in the direction of, yeah, we want it different, and on the other hand, you're getting it different. It's a I'm not sure where the join up is in there. How do you see that?
I think it's how we frame it to people, and how we say, if you do this, okay, you'll save congestion and all the rest. When you talk about carbon and you talk about climate change, it's so far in the future that people kind of either don't, it's not something that's visceral to them, basically. But I think if you start to think about the wider benefits, specifically around air quality, in Ireland we follow the EPA guidelines for air quality, which are a magnitude less than what the World Health Organization say we should do, and Dublin constantly is above the World Health Organization levels in terms of particulate matter and NOx. So if you start to frame it around that, and again, I was listening to do a debate on the radio, and it was a politician that represents people in the inner city, and he was like, "Why should my constituents take in long buckets full of particulate matter for cars that are just driving past? You wouldn't accept it anywhere else." So I think that we need to frame it a little bit better, and we need to show people what the benefits are, and that's why I had my first slide as that these are the benefits if we are able to realize all of the changes that we possibly want to do, that this will happen. We need to take people with us on the journey as well, and there will be parts like there was in the summer around the Keys. There'll be parts that are going to be difficult, and there's going to be parts that are going to be testy, and it's going to take strong people with a lot of strength to push these changes through.
Okay, so I've now got loads of I see questions in the chat. One of which is actually very relevant to what we're just talking about. It's from Neela Couture. She writes, "Do you have examples of solutions to encourage the use of active modes of transport, e.g., walking or cycling, or improve interconnection of greener modes of transit? In terms of multimodality." Examples is what she's asking for. Is there something that you can, pull out of your trick box telling us that's how it should have been done?
Well, first of all, in improving active travel, I think that infrastructure is a huge part of what we need to do there. One of my postdocs, Robbie Egan, he did a huge study on how people perceive the infrastructure, and he did a massive evaluation of submissions on a piece of infrastructure that was going out in the said part of the city. The key kind of thing he found there was that people don't perceive cycling as a mode of transport. They perceive it as somebody just cycling around. It's fun or whatever it is. These are people that are commuting. If all these people were cycling as well, your congestion would be an awful lot worse. So I think it is infrastructure, and that's one of the things that is definitely required. In terms of the integration between public transport modes, I think we're all waiting for the next generation ticket, or you can just use your debit card or your whatever card to tap on and tap off, not have a leap card. I'm not 100% convinced that that bit of technology is really going to push people all that much forward. It didn't really with the leap card. It would be great to have. It will make it easier. But is it being
Can I
used?
just put in there for a minute? Because
Yeah.
one of the things that I noticed, though, I had to buy a car for the first time in my life. As a climate scientist, I've managed not to do it. and I never used cars much. But I also lived in areas where I just, I would walk 5 kilometers if I had to go somewhere. And now I'm in Dublin and I walk everywhere. I walk to all the meetings. Literally everything is within a 5 kilometer radius. Always, all the departments I have to go to. And I notice that other people don't do that. And I realize that's because I've been always doing it. And it's not because I'm brilliant or anything, but when I go to the Google Maps to look at how I to get there, the first thing that they say is you want to take your car. The little sign that comes up is for route is car. And then it comes public transport, and then only then you get walking, right? So what if we just changed it around in Google Maps to actually showing walking first, and all other bad or worse routes of transport to actually, to make people think about, is this a walk that you could do, rather than, do I have to get onto public transport even for this? And I noticed there's an awful lot of suggestion in the way we look at how we're going to get somewhere. It's always the car first. And I sort of think we should have maps for our cities, which first of all show you walking. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that, and Dublin City's done an awful lot of that in terms of the wayfinding around the city, and that has improved. Yeah, I think that's to promote the greener modes first. And some of the apps, the TFI app does that, maybe more so than the Google app. But then we did a research project, and now it's going back nearly 12 years or maybe even more. And we did that. We prioritized walking and cycling, the greener modes first, and we showed people the carbon, we showed people the cost. There
Yeah.
was slight changes in it, but not as much as you would want.
So do you think people would, I mean, I kind of left the transport app very quickly because I found it extremely, yeah, I would say it took ages to load and it crashed and all of this stuff. But I think I might write to Google. Can you please stop this and see what happens? But anyway, that takes us to another level. It's about using, the go-to is, can we use AI? What sort of new technologies? And please don't start with e-cars first, because we can talk about them at the end of this new technology. Do you actually see new forms of technology? And information technology is what we just discussed, but other forms of technology which might make us move further and faster, like just say you had an AI in your car which said, actually, you definitely are starting to use too much CO2, you might want to reroute and go this way. Or, I mean, that's just to get you warm, but I'm sure you're not needing that.
The technologies we need for transport have been there for almost a century. They're bicycles, they're buses, and they're trains. And there's, it's collective modes together, or it's walking and cycling, and that's it. AI, yeah, AI is going to be a fantastic tool for modeling the way we and all the data that we have and getting insights into it. Um, Autonomous vehicles, I'm not very much a fan of. We're spending billions on making it easier to drive. I'm not sure that's, if we were spending the same amount of money on getting people into public transport and walking and cycling, I think we would have a much bigger bang for our buck in terms of climate. I see AI and all the technologies being very, very useful when it comes to looking and getting more insights into how we travel, because the modeling approaches we have now, while they are fantastic, there's lots of nuances that they don't pick up. They don't pick up working from home 2 or 3 days a week, or they don't pick up, stage trips where you might take a scooter and then get on a bus, that type of thing. We'll get a lot more information out of that. But as for, a drone that's going to fly us around and get us out of congestion, yeah, I really don't
Yes.
see that happening. Yeah, and I'm not sure I'd be a fan of it either.
Yeah, but I have a question here. From Maeve Whelan. She says, given the issues with grid capacity and HGVs, what are your thoughts on the potential for hydrogen in road transport, given the AFIR infrastructure requirements?
I think hydrogen will have a huge part to play when it comes to heavy goods vehicles, where they'll be more difficult to decarbonize with batteries because the batteries are bigger and the distances and all the rest are different as well. So I think that's the part that hydrogen will play. In terms of hydrogen for regular passenger cars, I think that's still a way off. I think hydrogen as well, also in terms of our public transport, that's where it has an awful lot of potential.
Okay. I personally I'm not too sure about hydrogen, having witnessed where big countries like Germany or etc. are going to get their hydrogen produced, right? We're going to end up with an interesting form of energy colonialism, which I actually find very worrying overall, and hydrogen might be transported all over the world, simply because we're going to start using hydrogen, and then you need a fleet of ships to do that, so therefore there's a lot of knock-on hydrogen issues, which when you look at it globally, how do you see that actually? That's what interests me personally now.
Yeah, I don't think we should
Transport of it.
yeah, I don't think we should bake ourselves into another technology or another fuel type that leaves us where we currently are still.
Yeah.
And that's why research is so important to consider all of the different aspects equally. Like, I'm not to mention electric cars, but electric cars, the ethics of those and the embedded carbon into them as well. We really need to consider these things really carefully.
Yeah, so and there are one or two questions here online as well. One of the things that I noticed from your statistics was this strange interest in large cars, right? Which has something to do with how much you earn when you're doing really well. It seems to be a status symbol. I noticed elsewhere in the world also that if you're well-to-do, you have this gigantic Mercedes SUV. And if you're actually even more well-to-do, you actually have a gigantic SUV Mercedes in the meantime. Okay, so the one thing that I kind of worry about is, and I hear it here in my local mechanic who keeps telling me, don't buy an e-car yet, Karen, it's far too expensive and I can't fix it, right? And you see that we do have a car poverty. We
Mm.
do somehow have a form of poverty and richness in the way we use our transport. So how do you actually see this? And these are questions here online with
I've
regard to that.
I've seen some of the questions and they're great. I don't often quote Margaret Thatcher, but she did say that if you find yourself using public transport, you failed in life. I think the inverse is probably true. Um, uh, but when it comes to the cars, it's the OEMs, it's the manufacturers. They're the people that are pushing these bigger vehicles on us. Some of the bigger vehicles don't have an engine that's much bigger than their smaller car equivalent. It is that it's a lack of choice. I recently bought it was not new, a second-hand electric car, but it was very, very difficult for it not to be an SUV. And that's the market that's out there. A good friend of mine, Geraldine Herbert, who's for my money the person that knows the most about car fleets and car sales in this country. She would say it's the OEMs and it's the EU that need to crack down on it. Some countries have tried. They've tried in France to introduce a weight-based vehicle tax. They've tried in Norway as well, but the amount of vehicles that are actually impacted is quite small. The people that own those vehicles have very large salaries and lots of wealth, so they continue as they are.
Yeah,
And outside of the climate thing, a toddler comes in front of one of these vehicles, forget
shocking.
about it. Forget about
Absolutely
it.
shocking. Yeah, it really is. So de facto, it's about changing our mindset, and that's actually what we also, as university teachers and university and E3 in our case, will have to try and do with all our new, I would say, transdisciplinary teaching efforts that we have. So you would see education, I would imagine, also being key into changing communication styles and choices and showing choices. Do I get that right?
Oh, 100%. And equally, say in my own school, I was really lucky this morning. I was able to go up to the National Wayfinder Center, which is this huge centre that um, was constructed by Vision Ireland, and it's all about inclusivity in transport and how people with disabilities are able to use public transport. And there was a statistic there that I think is going to haunt me. And I've already said this to you, that only 6% of people with a disability in Ireland use public transport. So we need to think about, from my own perspective, like say teaching our civil engineers, get them up there, get them to see what we have to do, and start to look at it from different perspectives. I think it is really important in terms of design, from say from a civil engineering perspective, but then from all perspectives. You know, I work with psychologists, I work with geographers, I work with so many other people, and it's getting their visions and getting their perspectives into the room. And one anecdote, I was down in Kilkenny, and it was all about they were changing the city and they were going to be putting in lots more pedestrian areas. And a local councillor, I went to speak about something like I spoke about today, and the local councillor turned to me and said, "This guy here owns a big shop on the main street. He's the guy you need to watch out for." And I just replied and I said, "But he's in the room to listen, and that's the most important thing. And
Yeah.
with that, then you can get consensus, and then you can get change."
Yes, exactly. I love that example. That's exactly the way it is out there, and the diversity element is key in order to actually resolve what is actually at the moment an unjust transition, if I may say so, in the climate space. So I think now, looking at the time, I'd just like to take us back to the beginning and looking ahead. And so if I could sort of summarize, you kind of see that it might not be so likely that we actually see a 50% reduction by 2030, or do you still see that that is a possibility if we really get our act off the ground? I mean, the UN just published their climate report, in which they said we can still make 1.5, and I'm sitting here going, oh yeah, interesting one. That, how are we going to do it? It's probably the last call. So how, do you see that we might make 2050, that it's possible if we just pull out all the stops together now?
If the country got together in the same ways we did around COVID and worked in unison to do it, yes, I think we could do it. I think maybe perhaps if you take a step back and look at the way in which all of the sectors had to decarbonize by 50%, no one ever really thought about the sectors that it will take longer to do it in. Like energy is doing a great work, agriculture is doing better than transport is. Perhaps it is, a play between the budgets that transport is given longer, and perhaps if we hit 30% by 2030, I think that will be a great achievement. But then within this time period that we have to decarbonize transport longer, we need to put in the infrastructure that enables us to decarbonize it more rapidly towards 2050.
And we all have to take responsibility as, yeah, Homo sapiens, and we need a functioning, planet in the end. So finally, actually, what advice would you give to students and young people and young professionals, and also obviously diverse communities, if I may say so, at aiming to make, how are we going to aim together to make a meaningful impact in transport sustainability? Do we have to stand up and really make it bow high, or how are we going to do this?
Well, I think, that there's a mix of things. I think we need to be radical in some places. I think we need to bang doors. I think we need to protest, in some cases. I think we need to listen to each other. Even if the view is diametrically opposed to what you want, you need to understand why that person is so far away from your way of thinking, and sit down and listen to that. I think that's one of the kind of key things. I also think in the way in which we educate our students, they have to be able to think outside of the box. They have to be able to, in terms of engineering, kind of ill-defined problems, and engineers hate that. And you go, well, think outside of the box. Think of what other disciplines you might need to bring with you to achieve your goals. I think that's one of the key things. And I think listening is one of the most important things. But then, in terms of the rapid way in which we need to decarbonize, the climate doesn't care about elections. It doesn't care about the economy. It doesn't care about how much we value carbon, because it's, all of these things, the climate doesn't care about. And we do need rapid action. And there is an election coming up.
Okay, Brian, that was a really good end statement. Make your voice heard is probably the summary of it, and communicate with everyone around you. Take those seriously who disagree, and try and find a good middle road at those moments. And with that, I'd really like to thank you for this extremely stimulating hour. I could go on, yeah, just chatting to you forever. I know, looking at the questions which we have to somehow try and answer. I hope they've been saved. Yeah, we might just bundle them and answer them in one go and send it to everyone. Yeah, that the community of listeners in here is very diverse and obviously extremely interested in the topic in all sorts of different ways. And I think you've gone and answered nearly all the questions, but it obviously shows you've touched. Thank you so much for this, and thank you all for listening and joining this event. We in E3 and Trinity need your comments and your ideas, and yeah, your us is probably the best description. So with that, bye bye, and everybody have a good day. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.